is there a place in this project for a visioning process that incorporates a vision of society at large, not just at this regional level? Because I feel like if you don't address white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism in a meaningful dialogue, then those bacterial spores, to keep with the biological metaphor, are just sitting there waiting to become virulent with the right conditions. And so I'm just curious if there's a place for that sort of analysis in this project and developing a vision that is not just pragmatic. A lot of theory gets talked about more than the pragmatic side of things, which is not great. I'm loving all the pragmatic stuff I'm hearing. But what's the society that we're moving towards?
Awesome. I'm going to respond to it, and then so you're giving me goosebumps. Great question. It was a goosebump question. Yeah, definitely. And a few things I'll say to that. One is there's something called the Next System Project. Are you familiar with that? Gar Alperovitz and Naomi Klein helped to found it too. They have a podcast, the Next System Podcast, and that's exactly what they're doing, is asking the questions, what would a truly life-serving, long-term, regenerative political and economic system look like in the United States? And they're doing some really amazing work, and they've got veteran people who've been in the co-op movement and working at all different scales and in system, out system for a long time, and they've got some really great podcasts and essays about that. And by the way, they had a paper an essay contest 3 years ago, and the essay that won was about mutual aid societies out of all the thousands of essays they had submitted.
Say those names again.
The names of the people. The Next System Project. Yeah, and they have the Next System podcast. So they've done a way better job than I can even articulate of talking about all many different dimensions of that question. And then the other thing I'll say is that what I've learned in permaculture and am applying here is that we have to determine the right scale for each type of action, and that there are different scales that are appropriate for different needs and actions. So for instance, we have in my neighborhood, Earthaven, we have a microgrid co-op, which we decided to, rather than everybody replace all their single little photovoltaic arrays that they had installed when Earthaven was built, and now are aging out, and everyone was like looking at a $15,000 replacement cost per household, we all decided to pool money together and create a microgrid that has one shared battery array, one shared PV system, one shared generator, made a $60,000 system instead of spending $120,000 or $150,000 on a bunch of separate systems, and it's more reliable and less polluting. That's a good scale to collaborate on for a microgrid. We have about 30 people involved in that. If it were 10 people, it would be too few to get the economy of scale. If it were 200 people, it would be too complicated, and we'd start to have like administrative politics, right? So that's a good scale for that thing, right? For a poultry co-op, we also have a poultry co-op. We have 6 people in that, just enough to trade out so I can go away like I am right now for 5 days to go dig kudzu roots tomorrow morning. And I can go away for 5 days, and there's somebody at home taking care of the chickens and the ducks. We don't need 30 people in the poultry co-op, right? Well, mutual aid hits this point of scale where it's between the village scale and the nation state scale. Village scale isn't big enough to provide health insurance, health care, right? We don't get the economy of scale. You need about 10,000 people to get the economy of scale for healthcare cooperatives in the US from what I've been studying, right? But also, we see that the health insurance industry, as big as it is too big scale. It's not accountable, right? So mutual aid hits this sweet spot of scale where it's big enough to have leverage in the existing economic political conditions, but small enough to be accountable to its membership and to be steered at that level. So what I think we do is we have regional mutual aid networks that are at that sweet spot of scale, which is probably different from region to region too, and then those link up together as part of the next system, which those guys and gals are talking a lot better about than I can, but they have a whole ideas for transforming US politics to work with participatory economics and a lot of really cool stuff. So then we get to influence that. Just say one more thing about it. And so then, like with African American mutual aid groups, then becoming political organizing units, right? And we're deliberately keeping this non-political explicitly, but still it becomes, once you have that cultural glue, it becomes a way that you can then work together more effectively for political and social movements at a larger scale and to influence them.
It seems like we've got to make sure that the foundation is sound. It's this whole system, political system, has been stacked against us for, like, we can't as citizens of this area say we don't want fracking. That whole decision process has been preempted to the Department of Natural Resources or whoever it was, and that's just only a minor example. And it's like, okay, but maybe one thing that will help lubricate this whole cooperative system as well is, if you're not aware of it, there's a Community Bill of Rights that they're beginning to start to collect petition signatures to put it on the ballot as a referendum in Asheville. So if you're a registered voter in Asheville, you can vote and say, basically it's saying that we as citizens of this area, we have a right to clean air, clean water, clean food, and clean energy. And it's been passed in over 200 areas, villages, counties across the country so far. And CELDEF is one of the primary people that are educating others about it. And CELDEF stands for the Center for Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And if you, so be on the lookout, because this is coming. It's started already. And I think it's a way of making sure we've got a sound foundation and we don't have Dillon's rule or the state trying to preempt us and that sort of stuff in a lot of these decisions.
Yeah, we really need to anticipate that stuff, because if we're successful in something like this, there's going to be pushback. Yeah, big time. Mm-hmm.
Could you define non-political?
Right. Oh, good question. That was just a term that I used in passing, but what I meant was not explicitly aligning with any political party. That's what I meant. Yeah, there is nothing that's non-political, if that's where you're going.
Anyone who could sit through the last 5 hours and believe that you weren't going to do something political.
Thanks, good point. Yeah, Gordon. Yeah.
Just sitting there thinking that we kind of exist in a purposefully created solidarity crisis in our culture. And then if the structures that you are wanting to create can be attractive for participation across cultural divides, that it could be a great healing force in that interactions based on shared dependency can be very powerful.
May it be so. Yeah, so I think the point is, in case anyone didn't hear it, or it was a comment really that this could be a powerful cultural healing movement that reaches across existing cultural and political, and I'm going to go ahead and add in racial divides, and allows us to connect people up, maybe getting around the back door of our reflexive responses to each other. Is that kind of where you're going with it, Gordon?
Yeah. That we need something like that because we are purposefully divided.
Yeah, exactly.
And so making it creative to all the different.
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. Right, and something about collaborative economics helps to do that. So yeah, two last things I want to say before we take a change. One is just to tie it in as an example, more tangibly to climate resilience and land use. And one of the ways that I see that I could see this contributing to those efforts, we have a working group on a regional carbon credit group, and carbon credits are a very controversial topic in the ecological healing movement because they've been used in some pretty poor ways in the past. For instance, the state of California paying Brazil to kick its indigenous farmers off their land, the Amazon rainforest, so they can then plant African palm trees to sequester carbon so California can claim that it's carbon neutral. That's ridiculous. But what we're looking at is modeling after some other programs. There's a group called the Ithaca Institute, Ithaca with a K, in Switzerland, that is working with voluntary carbon credits paid at $30 a ton from individuals and organizations in Germany and the UK to then fund Nepalese farmers to pay for the establishment costs, 3 to 5 year establishment costs of polyculture agroforestry plantings on abandoned rice paddies in Nepal. And that's allowing those farmers to stay in their villages rather than moving to cities. It creates a quantified amount of carbon sequestration. They're actually testing soil and wood samples to determine how much carbon is actually being sequestered. And then the farmers own the agroforestry plantings after that for perpetual livelihood creation. And so that model, we're looking at what would it be like to do something similar to that in our region, but it was all based in our region. So say that I had a business, a restaurant, and I wanted to account for our 250 tons of carbon footprint each year, while I also redesign some of the business operations to lower the real carbon footprint. I pay at a per ton rate into a fund, which then helps to pay landowners who are part of Co-operate WNC for establishment costs for different types of agroforestry plantings, which are sequestering carbon. So that helps to overcome that cost barrier to implementation, right? And we actually, this is another idea that seems to really be ready. Like there are a couple pilot projects lined up, and we're working with Green Built Alliance, which used to be the WNC Green Building Council, and they just finished a project at Isaac Dixon Elementary, where they put in a $200,000 photovoltaic array that was partially funded through regional carbon credits in a similar model to this. What?
What did they put in?
A photovoltaic array, a solar panel array, a $200,000 one, a significant one, that was funded not all from carbon credit money, but partially from carbon credit money. So now they want to do a tree planting based project. So we're teaming up with them to look at a couple pilot sites for how that could work out here. So again, that's actually just an example of how through a regional scale, right, the right scale again for something like this. If you tried to do that at a county scale, it might be a little too tiny to really work, right? And if you start to do it at the whole Southeast US, it's too big and you still don't have accountability. But if we do it at the regional scale, I, as a restaurant business owner, could then visit the farm, or better yet, buy foods from the tree crops being produced on the farm that my carbon credits help to fund. And again, it creates relational economics there. So it's more than just a transfer of money, it's a relationship getting created from that. So that's one of the types of ideas of how we can use this regional scale thing to support things that are addressing climate resilience in a meaningful way. All right, last point before we take a break, which is the growth of this thing, right? So this is a big question of that so many of us, including myself, have, is how do we get there, right? How do we get to something that is this crazily ambitious and hopefully effective and have a realistic growth model for getting to it? And so just to start to paint a little constellation of that, and this goes back to what Patrick is saying about education being such a critical part of this. So I have some notes I'm just going to pull out. And if we had a little more time, I would draw this, but I'm not going to draw it. I'm just going to talk about it, and hopefully some of it will stick. And this also addresses the whole thing of like, at the beginning I asked, who here is unclear about exactly what Co-operate WNC is? And over half the people raised hands, which makes sense because it's like, what are we really talking about? So there was the definition kind of, or the description or vision that I was describing of, right, using collaborative economics to support a regional network of physical community centers, right? That's kind of clear, approaching clarity, right? But how do we get there? Because each of those is going to be a major project that it's going to take a whole group of people and years to develop. And so what do we do in the meantime to move towards that? So here's what I'm thinking, is that in the first phase, it's kind of savings pools are a really awesome thing we can do. Savings pools, establishing one like I was mentioning earlier with your homies, people you already have in your life who you want to have more interdependence with and have a monthly meal with and put in savings pool. You can start that now. That's something that you can start, right? Another thing is getting involved with the time banking that's going on in Asheville via the Asheville time banking system and via the Humans time banking system. They have a website, mutualaidnetwork.org. Also, this is something that has been done a lot, in my understanding, with the African American and Latin American mutual aid societies in the U.S., what they just call learning circles, right? And a learning circle, sometimes it's you're working with books that you're all reading, but the essential principle is that there's a lot of knowledge necessary to do all this stuff well, and we can't just assume that we know it or we're going to figure it out. We need to find the right stuff that we need to learn. That's part of the service of Co-operate WNC. I'm assembling all these books, hundreds of articles and websites and everything right now. I'm organizing those, trying to get them into the most useful forms to save everybody else time, right? And then form learning circles, maybe those are the same as the savings pool circles, right? You get together once a month, have a meal, talk about the things you're studying, put money into the savings pool, get it going on like that. That can go well, by the way, with work parties, like what people are calling permablitzes, but I don't actually really like that word because it kind of refers to like bombing cities, blitzkrieg, right? But work parties where we do a rotating work cycle and do work projects on each other's properties. Another next thing in the kind of early phase is asset mapping. And one of the things I'm trying to get cooking is, because the last hour we're going to spend trying to get our heads around how we can all be involved in this, right? Is what things you all feel passionate about. Something that's going to take a lot of people's involvement to accomplish is asset mapping, community-based asset mapping. So folks who are distributed in different places and want to participate in that or have already started things like that, we can work together on that. So asset mapping, in the next year, we're looking at putting a lot of effort into that and want to actually get some additional staff to focus entirely on asset mapping. And by the way, if anyone wants to fund staff to focus on asset mapping, please, we're open to that. And then a leadership cohort, this is something that we're looking at probably for 2020, is getting folks who have stepped forward and have projects going on already, like in Silo, like in Jackson County, like at Earthaven, a couple other places that are emerging, where we actually have an intensive leadership development cohort around this that intensively teaches the skills and tools, embeds a permaculture design certification in it while we're at it so that people get land use planning kind of skills from it. And we end up with this 13-month cycle of learning at the end of which the participants have a physical and social and economic design for the community center that they're trying to develop. So then at the end of that cycle of a year, we have some serious planning that's happened with peer mentorship to get these community centers going on. So that's kind of the first phase. Second phase, we think, is getting something going on with the credit union, whether that is working with self-help credit union or establishing our own credit union. But at that point, hopefully having enough savings pools going that we can set up a shared credit union account and start to do some of the larger loans that require pooling multiple savings pools together. Also at that point, stage 2, I'm imagining 2021, 2022, having some physical community centers going. And the possibility, and this is based on the New Zealand folks who it's also come from the permaculture movement, they've started doing auto insurance. I don't know, this is kind of weird, but they've said, you know, they were looking for the leaks in the economy, in the local economy, and they said, we're paying millions of dollars to all these auto insurance companies. Why don't we do our own auto insurance? And that's generating then revenue for them to do other things with. Maybe that's happening in stage 2. And then finally, phase 3, and this is all up for discussion and innovation by better minds than mine on these topics, is a healthcare co-op. Right, so getting a healthcare cooperative going, which is a big deal, getting a healthcare co-op going, because yeah, it seems like about 10,000. From research I've been doing about existing healthcare cooperatives and where that economy of scale, because what you're basically doing is you're mimicking, say, the Affordable Care Act, where healthy people are paying for poor people, right? but what we want probably is to design a healthcare cooperative that's paid into by members now, but is designed to receive federal funding in the case of universal healthcare coming online. right? Because how is universal health care going to be administered if and when it gets passed through? It's going to have to be administered by regional groups who know about the healthcare needs and situations in each region. So we set it up as a thing that's funded cooperatively now, but that could be funded federally when that funding comes along. And then there's all kinds of details going beyond that. But that's kind of a little bit of a growth pattern that we've been beginning to map out to try to understand how this thing can be tangible and really start to help our lives start to achieve some of the goals and develop the capacity towards the kind of larger mycorrhizal network. And with that, I'm gonna take a breath. And all right, so it's 5:30. We have an hour till the beautiful dinner that you're preparing for us.
And I wanted to make just a couple of additions
yes.
to what you
Great.
were talking about there. Why not also auto repair? Trust, cooperative-based auto repair, so you know for sure you can trust it. And if they don't get it right, people make mistakes, but we deal with it. And as far as healthcare goes, tied into our food system, the co-op already tracks our sales to give rebates, and so your premiums are based on how much good food you buy.
Right. Right, and there could be
What other things you do, like, what other things you're doing to make sure that you, because right now our healthcare system is really impossible. Is we make people sick with cancer, is we make people sick with deadly food. No healthcare system can fix that. We actually have to get healthy in order to have a healthcare system that works.
Yeah.
Then we maintain health. Can't dig out.
And you need herbs to be.
All of it. Herbs, all the different traditional healing systems.
As well as modern ones,
Yeah, which basically empower people to heal themselves.
Yeah, stable.
Which is, our bodies are totally designed for.
Yeah.
We just have to stop sabotaging.
Earthing too, putting our bare feet on the earth.
I'm sorry, what?
Putting our bare feet on the earth.
All of it, yeah. The magnetic
All the good
fields,
stuff.
the LED lights, the works, yeah. All of it, yeah.
While we're kind of having a little question thing right now, I'm going to pass around the sign-up sheet for anyone who's not on the Co-operate WNC newsletter if you want to be on there. It just has name, email address, and if you have any specific interests from what we've talked about so far.
Well, also, do you think you have or know of an asset? Write that down too, right?
All right, great point. Yeah, Kathy.
Well, one of the things that we're going to need for our survival and for our preventive community activism around climate change is going to be non-carbon, non-fossil fuel systems of transportation.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that. And we need transportation that is equitable, that can lift up people who do not drive cars because A, they may not have the money, B, they may be disabled, C, they may be too young. And of course, I think this is one of the things that can really level the playing field so that people can access their jobs. So I would like to put in a pitch for a focal point of mutual aid groups to be a focus on excellent electrified equitable transportation.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And that reminds me of what this gentleman, what's your name? Sorry, John, I'm glad to know your name too, but also the guy behind you. Jake. What Jake was saying about technology tools. I think this is an area where ride sharing can be facilitated by technology so much. And one of the ideas we've been working on is this mutual aid portal or dashboard, it's called. It would be a home page that you'd have on your phone or your computer that would be a many functional connection with the mutual aid network. So it would be like what rides are available that day, what food is available at pickup points that day, child care, all kinds of local news. It would be fine-tuned and customizable to the person, but it would be connecting me into all the kinds of services and interconnection relational things with the people in the mutual aid network that could help meet my needs that day.
Co-op D&D, and a portion of what you get, bring in, you move into the network.
There you go, right. So it could be a lot of different functions of that.
And-
Ride sharing could be a
Yeah, and
major
it
one.
wouldn't just be limited to ride sharing. I think it would be also about
Right.
investing
I see.
in,
Yes.
you know, in the infrastructure
Got it.
and in the vehicles. And the reason that I say that is because, you know, the transportation bureaucracy is so rigid and so
Yeah.
difficult to move. So it sounds like a good thing to do an end run around.
Yeah, all right, good. All right, let's take two more comments now, and then we're going to do a little break in an activity. Yeah.
Are you teaching this at the OGS?
Yes, in abbreviated form, yeah.
Okay, so are you going to have a sign-up paper for people interested in learning more about mutual aid there besides your class?
Besides my class?
Besides your class.
Oh, like at a table or something? I hadn't thought about it, but that's a good idea.
I would help you with this, and one thing I'm going to invite everybody here to consider is to join me in getting the word out. And to me, one easier place than not might be our farmers markets. And I'm really curious, I don't need the answer to this, but I know there's several farmers markets represented here today. So if we start putting the word out that way, and then on another note, this is a very important book. It's called An Electronic Silent Spring. It's by Katie Singer. And when we're talking about our health and getting more people on board together with like mutual aid, 5G technology is heading to towns and big cities whether they want it or not. And Jacob just left. It might have been CellDef that helped some communities ban 5G from ever coming in. And I think this is crucial.
Well, and we got aware of bringing Deborah Davis, who wrote Disconnect, about the dangers of our cell phones. She's an environmental, she's into environmental illness. She's got an institute for that, and she's been doing a clarion call for this for a long time. And she actually had an editorial in the New York Times warning people about 5G. So she's going to be speaking in June, and we'll bring her in exactly because of how major that problem is.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so I'm going to try a novel thing because it's 5:35, 5:40, and we're hoping to have a round of this little exercise to gather some ideas that you all have about how you're going to connect with this work. And I'm afraid that if we take a break and then come back, it's going to take so long to get all of us back together at the end of this day that it might be difficult to have that time. I'm going to ask if we can take a 5-minute silent break without talking and come back in 5 minutes to do this exercise. What do y'all think about that? All right, let's enjoy our piece. It'll be like a meditative thing. All right, great, 5-minute break.